Be talking about simplifying radicals. So when you are simplifying radicals, you're going to have to use this idea of prime factorization that we learned on the previous note video. So when you talked about prime factorization, we were talking about splitting up the 95. Well, again, remember what I talked about. When it ends in a 5, you know that it's probably going to be a multiple of 5. So I took 95 and I divided it by 5. And I found out that that split up into 5 and 19. Well, 5 can't be split up anymore, and neither can 19. So that's going to end up being 5 times 19 for your prime factorization. When we take a look at 36, okay, so when we look at 36, I'm like, okay, what divides 36? Well, it's an even number, so 2 has to. So I get 2 and 18. Well, 2 can't be broken down anymore, but 18 can. I can break 18 down into 9 and 2, and then I can break 9 down to 3 and 3. So when I go ahead and I write out my prime factorization, remember I look at the ends of each leg. So I'm going to have 2 times 2 times 3 times 3, and I'm going to multiply all of that together in order for you to multiply the 36. Then when we're taking a look at 72, I want to figure out what breaks up 72. So I just took 72 divided by 4 because I was curious, is that going to work? And I ended up getting 4 and 18. Well, 4 I can break down to 2 and 2. 18 I can break up to 9 and 2. And 9 I can break down to 3 and 3. So really all we're doing is we're trying to break this down as much as we can. So then what I'm going to do is multiply all of these together. So I have 3 2's, so that's going to come first because I like to put it in numerical order. And then my 2 3's. So I have 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3. So that's your prime factorization of number 3. All right, let's take a look at a radical expression. So what is a radical expression? It's any expression with a radical term, or what we sometimes call the square root. So that's what we're kind of working with a lot, is going to be square roots. And we're going to be working around all of those icky decimals we could maybe get. So what is a simplified form of a radical expression? So there's no perfect squares left under the radical. What is a perfect square? Well, that's that list we made yesterday when we talked about all of the perfect squares. Those don't want to be left underneath the radical. There's also no fractions underneath the radical. Okay, so we don't want to have any fractions left underneath there, and there's no radicals in the denominator of the fraction. That's just icky. So we can't have radicals in the denominator of the fraction. Now, all of those need to be true in order for us to have simplified radicals. So let's take a look at some of these rules that apply to radicals. Okay, so when you take and you multiply two radicals together, you get the square root of each one separately. So for example, if we had the square root of 36, I know that 4 times 9 is equal to 36. So that's actually equal to the square root of 4 times the square root of 9. Okay, so that's an example. Then, if I had a radical and I had the square root of 4 divided by 9, then that would end up being the square root of 4 divided by the square root of 9. You can split it up that way. Now remember, we talked about earlier that you can't have a radical on the bottom. So we're going to be working with that more later on in this unit. So whenever you take the square of a square root, it's going to equal itself. Okay, so let's say I take the square root of 4 and then I square it. So when I take the square of a square root, you end up getting just what's underneath the radical. Now sometimes you could see it written as this. If I have the square root of 4 times the square root of 4, that's the same thing as the square root of 4 squared. So that's just going to equal 4. So those are two different ways that you could end up seeing that rule. So let's go ahead, let's just jump right into this. So really all you're going to be doing today is you are going to be simplifying these radicals. And you know what's going to help you is that prime factorization. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 1. So we want to take and we want to break down 50. Okay, so I want to break down 50. So what goes into 50? Well, 2 does. So I'm going to use 2 and 25. Now, what breaks down 25? Well, that's going to be 5 and 5. So just like what we did yesterday, I'm going to take and I'm going to multiply each of the everything out, but I'm going to multiply it underneath the radical. Now here's the thing that's new today. In order for you to break free of the radical, you need to have a partner in crime. So in order to break free of the radical, you need to have a partner in crime. So the only thing that can come out of the radical is this pair of 5s. So I'm going to bring it to the outside. And when you bring it to the outside, you just write it once. So now that pair becomes 1. So then I'm just going to get 5 square root of 2. So I broke that pair out and I put the pair on the outside. And then left underneath is the square root of 2. So the 2 can't come out of the radical because it doesn't have a partner. All right, let's take a look at number 2. So number 2, we want to split up 48. So what are some things that multiply to 48? You could divide by 2 if you wanted to. Well, I took and I divided it by 3. And I ended up getting 16 and 3. And then I can break 16 down to 4 and 4. And each of my 4s I can break down into 2s. So then underneath my radical, I'm going to write all of this out. I have 2 2s, and then 2 more 2s, and then 3. Now recall, to break out of the radical, you have to have a partner. So there's a pair here, that guy can break out. And there's a pair here, and that guy can also break out. So each of those, when they come out of the radical, are going to not be a pair anymore. So there's that first group. There's that second group. And then left underneath the radical is still that 3. Finally, in order for us to simplify this, we have to multiply those 2 on the outside together. So if you take 2 pairs out, you're going to multiply the 2 pairs together. So 2 times 2 is 4, so you end up getting 4 square root of 3 for number 2. Next, let's take a look at 32. So what divides 32? Well, I'm going to use 16 and 2. Oops, come on, 2. Okay, and then 16 is going to break down into 4 and 4, and thus 2, 2, 2, 2. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write out my square root. So I have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So I have one pair of 2s and another pair of 2s. So each of those, because they have a pair, can break out. So then I have 2 times 2, and then left underneath the radical is that lonely 2 that didn't have a partnership, that poor sad little 2. Okay, so then we need to multiply that, which we took out on the outside. So 2 times 2 is 4, and then you're left with the square root of 2. All right, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at this next bunch here. So we're going to continue splitting these down. I'm going to start moving a little bit faster because hopefully you're getting the hang of this. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at 125. Well, whenever you see a number that ends in 25, you know that 25 multiplies into it. So I'm going to do 25, and 25 times 5 is what gives you that 125. So I'm going to take and I'm going to break down this 25 into 5 and 5. So I'm going to go ahead and write what I have underneath the radical. I have 5 times 5 times 5. So I see that I can take one partnership of 5s. That one partnership of 5s, that can be broken out. Well, whenever you break it out, you can get that 1 5. And then left underneath the radical is going to be that 5 without a partner. So we're going to keep the square root there. So the answer to number 4 is 5 square root of 5. So notice nowhere in anything that I'm doing am I leaving something as a decimal. There are no decimals here. So let's take a look at breaking down 80. So what goes into 80? Well, I see that it ends in a 0, and we talked about how things that end in a 0 are divisible by 10. So 80 divided by 10 is 8. So 80 I know I can break down to 10 and 8. 10 I can break down to 5 and 2. 8 I can break down to 4 and 2. And 4 I can break down to 2 and 2. So now I'm going to go ahead and write things underneath my radical. And again, I'm going to write them as in numerical order. So I have 4 2s at the ends of each of my legs. And then I have a 5. So I have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. Well, I have one pair of 2s that I can pull out, and then I have another pair of 2s that I can pull out. So I'm going to take each of those pairs out and write them on the outside. So I have 2 here, and I have 2 here, and then left underneath is the square root of 5. So what is 2 times 2? Well, that's going to be 4. So I multiply those together, and I end up getting 4 square root of 5 for my answer for number 5. So if you're starting to get the hang of this, you can go ahead and complete your note sheet on your own. But if you want to keep listening with the video, you can do that. I just ask that you actually watch the video and not scrub ahead. So what multiplies into 45? So multiplying into 45, I have 9 and 5. Okay, so I can break down that 9 into 3 and 3. So underneath my radical, I have 3 times 3 times 5. So I have a pair of 3s, and I can pull that out. So I take out the pair of 3s, and I have a 3 on the outside, and then I have a square root of 5 left underneath. So then my answer is 3 square root of 5. Alrighty, let's continue moving forward looking at more examples. So we're going to take a look at 7 through 9 now. And let's take a look at 100. So when I think of 100, I see that it ends in a 0. So I'm thinking 10, and then 10 and 10. Okay, well 10 breaks down to 5 and 2, and 10 breaks down to 5 and 2. So then I end up getting underneath my radical 2 times 5 times 5. So I have a pair of 2's, I can take that out, and I also have a pair of 5's. So what I notice is that everything underneath my radical ends up having a pair. So because it has a pair, my radical is going to go away altogether. And I'm just going to have 5 times 2, which is 10. Okay, so my answer to number 7 is just 10. There's no square root that's even involved. Taking a look at 75. So for 75, I know that 75 is divisible by 25. So there are multiple different ways that you can be doing this. If you want to use 5, you can do that as well. There's a lot of different ways you can be doing this. So 75 can be broken down into 5 and 25. No matter what way you do, you will always get the right answer if you do it correctly. So oops, I'm sorry, not 5. This should be a 3. Okay, so we have 3, and then 25 breaks into 5 and 5. So underneath my radical, I have 3 times 5 times 5. So then I have a pair of 5's. So I can take that pair of 5's out to the outside. So the pair of 5's I bring out to the outside, and then what's left over underneath my radical that doesn't have a partner stays underneath the radical. So I end up getting 5 square root of 3. Next, let's go ahead and let's take a look at splitting down 96. So I see that 96 is even, so I know it's divisible by 2. So 96 divided by 2 is 48. So I have 2 and 48. And now I need to break down that 48. Well, 48 I can break down to 6 and 8. 6 breaks down to 2 and 3. 8 breaks down to 2 and 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. So what I want to do now is I want to take all of my ends and write them underneath my radical. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2's, and 1 3. So now I'm going to go ahead and find my partnerships. Well, I have a pair of 2 here I can take out. I have a pair of 2 here I can take out. And the rest of these are left without a partner. So then I have 1 pair of 2's on the outside, another pair of 2's on the outside, and then underneath I have left 2 times 3. Well, 2 and 3 can't be partners because they're not the same number. So now we just need to multiply what's left over. 2 times 2 is 4. And then 2 times 3 is 6. So you end up getting 4 times the square root of 6 as your final answer. Let's take a look at these last 3 here, and then we are all done. So we want to take and we want to break down 64. So 64 we can break down into being 8 and 8. And then 8 breaks down to 4 and 2, and 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. Again, 8 breaks down to 4 and 2, and 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. So then underneath my radical I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 2's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 2's. So now I want to go ahead and find my pairs. So I have 1 pair of 2's that I can take out. I have another pair of 2's I can take out. And I have another pair of 2's that I can come out. So again, everything ended up being in pairs. So my radical is going to go away. I have 1 pair of 2's, 2 pair of 2's, 3 pair of 2's. And I multiply all that out, and I end up getting 8. So for number 10, the answer is 8. Now let's take a look at 384. I have no idea what multiplies into 384, but I see that it's even. So I divide it by 2, and then I end up getting 192. Well, I have no idea what divides 192, except that I see it's even, so I divide it by 2. And when I divide it by 2, I end up getting 96. So then I can take 96. And I divide that by 2, and I get 48. And 48 I divide to 6 and 8. 6 I divide to 2 and 3. 8 I divide to 4 and 2. 4 I divide to 2 and 2. Holy crap, that was a lot of numbers, but all I did was just break it down piece by piece. If it was even, I just kept dividing it by 2 till I got to something I knew. So let's take a look at our ends. We have an end, 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 end. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 2's, and 1 3. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to multiply that out. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 2's, and 1 3. So now I want to go ahead and find my pairs. 1 pair that I can take out, 2 pairs that I can take out, 3 pairs that I can take out. And 2 times 3 can't be a pair because they're different numbers. So on the outside I have 2 times 2 times 2, and left underneath the radical I have 2 times 3. So what's 2 times 2 times 2? Well, that's going to be 8. And what's 2 times 3? Is 6, and that's what's going to be underneath the radical. So notice I'm only multiplying things outside of the radical with things outside the radical, and things inside the radical with things inside the radical. Same thing with 216. I don't know what multiplies to 216, so I divided it by 2, and I got 108. Well, I don't know what multiplies to 108, so I'm going to divide it by 2 again, and I got 54. Well, I know things that go into 64, that's going to be 6 and 9. So I'm going to do 6, and I'm going to do 9. 6 I can break down to 2 and 3. 9 I can break down to 3 and 3. So now we can go ahead and we can write out our prime factorization. So what do we have? We have 1, 2, 3 2's, and 3 3's. 2, so 2, 2, 2, and 3, 3, 3. So let's go ahead and take out our pairs. So we have one pair here, and we have another pair here. So I have a pair of 2's that's coming out, and a pair of 3's that's coming out. And left underneath the radical, I just have 2 times 3. So then on the outside, 2 times 3 is 6, and then I'm going to draw my square root, and underneath, 2 times 3 is 6. So that concludes your note video for today. Go ahead and show me a completed note sheet when you are done. Thank you for listening.